Hello, and welcome to this episode of Blockchain Bylines. My name is Nic Cary, co-founder and vice chairman of blockchain.com. In this episode, we continue our exploration of AI, artificial intelligence, and we're joined today by Shaw Walters, founder of Eliza Labs. Now, Eliza Labs is behind Eliza OS. Eliza is a powerful multi-agent simulation framework designed to create, deploy, and manage autonomous AI agents. Now, it provides a flexible and extensive platform for developing intelligent agents that can interact across multiple platforms while maintaining consistent personalities and knowledge. So I'm really excited to learn today. And the real intention behind this podcast will be to help scaffold some education for our listeners. We're so interested at the intersection between AI, crypto, and sort of improving outcomes for regular people. So I can't have a better guest today than Shaw. So let's get right into it. Shaw, we got a little question for you, a little bit of a ritual here. We do have to ask, how did you get into this in the first place? Was your journey through crypto actually, or just in tech? I know you're in the venerable San Francisco today, so give us a little bit of background.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been a programmer for a very long time. I grew up just north of Silicon Valley, right when the internet came out. So I was, very much into all this stuff. But I had a pretty roundabout journey. I traveled through a lot of different interests in technology and was particularly interested in multiplayer game engine communication stuff, like what we might call the metaverse, and watching that whole hype cycle happen actually brought me toward crypto because I had really not seen much of a use case for crypto before that for myself. I was not really a big DeFi guy. And then once I saw I could have NFT wearables and I could compose avatars and all this stuff, I thought that was very interesting. And that all coincided with about the time that GPT-3 came out. So OpenAI had been working on this long before ChatGPT. ChatGPT was obviously what kind of broke out. And they came out with GPT-1, and I remember where I was. I remember okay, cool, I guess AI kind of works, but it might complete a sentence or something. It was a very small model. And then GPT-2, and you're like, oh, wow, this could write a poem, okay, something. But then when GPT-3 beta came out, that was the first time that for a lot of us, it was oh, wow, this is a path. And this is a path that we don't, you don't have to be a hardcore programmer. I mean, you do have to be a pretty hardcore programmer, not like a hardcore machine learning sort of person with a huge GPU stack. You can go leverage that from OpenAI and start applying that to building these looping, character driven things or NPCs or agents or whatever. And so this kind of new generation of agents, and I think most of the people I know who are in the agent space really got into it around the time of GPT-3 release, because that was the first time that I modeled it was 10 times bigger than the model came before. And that was the first time we were oh, wow, just scaling up really, really is all you need for these things to really rock.
Real quick, so when you say it's 10 times bigger, what does that mean? And how should people think about that when they hear that these models are growing exponentially? What exactly is happening and how is it beneficial?
Yeah, so if you think about a brain, right? I've got this cat up here, and he's got a few 100 million neurons and a bunch of connections between all of them. But I have a lot more neurons than him. The difference between me and this cat is more than anything just the amount of neurons that my brain has, and the brain density is just way, way bigger. And so if you think about a machine learning model, a small model is going to have a very small number of what we'll call neurons or weights or, whatever we want to think of them. And those are actually just very small numbers usually between 0 and 1, but it doesn't really matter. But it's just a lot of little switches and dials. And we've figured out if we plug in all of the dials together, we can build this massive thing that we can start to train on stuff. And the training is basically adjusting the individual dials if you imagine a program as being a series of knobs, and I can imagine just every single knob just perfectly, then I can, have some kind of model. And the more knobs I have, the more different possible edge cases and things I can control for, until it gets to be so large that it's okay, this actually starts to have brain intelligence. There's obviously a lot more in there. I don't know if we want to get into MLPs and attention and stuff, but
no, I think that's a great way to think about it. So it's sort of just brain capacity to a certain extent and the amount of intelligence that can sort of exist in that system.
Yeah.
You also use the word agents. We're hearing about that term all the time now, but I think it'd be helpful to define that term and maybe help our listeners maybe have a way of thinking about what that is and what it could be when they hear that, or that AI agents are now available for them to interact with and what they may be able to do with them, some practical examples.
So practically, like an agent is something that is pretty much anything that does something on your behalf. And agents don't have to be these super complex AI agents. It could just be, and we think of like an agent as something in programming that's been there forever, which is like anything that does something on your behalf that you've like said, oh, hey, do that for me. Could even be a human. Now, though, that we've got AI agents in our world, we think of them as like, well, what's different about an AI agent than a program or something? I think that
Right.
there
A
is
piece of
this,
software. Yeah.
yeah. So I think there's a sense that one, it does something on your behalf. Two, like if technically it's got its own sense of internal state, right? So it sort of updates itself and like has its own way of changing its own state would be like I think a technical description of the agent. And then three, I think what's most important is that it kind of does what we think of as humans as doing. I think, like in our lives when we think of an agent now in this more modern nomenclature, like we're really thinking of like something that an AI would do that a human might have done before. Do I have an AI agent to check my email or to do whatever for me? And you could argue that something like ChatGPT is an AI agent because, you're chatting with it. It has a sense of self. It goes out and does stuff. It sort of does things on your behalf. But now I think especially when we think of AI agents, we think of agents as being out in the world, as being, in my group chat or could literally be in a few years a robot walking down the street getting my groceries for me if Elon Musk has his way. So yeah, so I think it's a very broad thing. I think this comes from like us just trying to describe problems in game theory, like the principal agent problem. Like I'm a principal, I have an agent. There's a is the agent doing what I want it to be doing? And these are problems that come up in our life, and now we're starting to quantify them with AI agents. Like, okay, I want this agent to do what I'm doing and not hallucinate or go off track. But this is actually, I think, just like a quantification and embodiment of something we've been dealing with in humans the whole time.
Sure. So let's talk about Eliza Labs. How did it come to be?
Oh, well, it all starts with a joke, of course. I've actually been working on the Eliza framework for a long time under the hood. I've been battle testing it on basically building a startup on top of it and decided I didn't really have the conviction in the startup. But I really love the framework. I love building AI agent frameworks that solve like a lot of really complex stuff that I think you might not just see on the face of it. Things like how do we route information from, how do an agent who I'm like talking to on Discord and then it decides to go send someone a Telegram message. It's actually like a shockingly hard problem. Or like, how do I role access and make it so that it doesn't like go spend all my money and listen to somebody else or hallucinate or, there's a lot of different things you have to deal with. And so I was very passionate about all just like the very nuts and bolts of this stuff. And I'd been in crypto. I'd done a lot of NFT projects and especially done like that kind of 2022 metaverse hype. But I'd sort of like gone back towards just focusing on the AI side of this stuff. And then I think what really changed everything was with Truth Terminal was Mark Andreessen donates 50,000 to Truth Terminal, kind of see what happens. And I'd actually already been like following in that world. It was not crypto, right? This was just like AI Twitter, really. But then degens realized they could get Truth Terminal to shill meme coins or to create meme coins they could then shill, which is like fart coin and that stuff. And that just like lit this whole meta on fire around us. And so it was just kind of right place, right time, already had the framework. And we launched an agent. And Truth Terminal was pasting that, like they were writing all this stuff in the infinite backrooms, and then Andy was pasting it into Twitter. And so we just plugged a bot directly onto Twitter and he was just saying stuff. And I think people were really shocked that he was very offensive. Like he really just really told people what he thought. And we had recreated like a pretty sharp tongued person. And that like spread and people really didn't believe it. They were like, well, this is obviously just a bunch of dudes writing these messages in a warehouse somewhere. We're like, no. It's open source. You can try it yourself. And so I think once people realized they could use our tech to launch their own projects, it just it went crazy. And we were seeing like 500 to 1,000 agent launches a day in January. And it was about 50,000 agents on Twitter. And I'd say that most of them though really fell into the slot bot category where like, I would love to see people doing really, really complex things with them. But the vast majority, obviously, are like downloading the thing, copy and pasting it, and then like launching a meme coin. But within that, a lot of people also launched like really interesting, platforms and experiments and different kinds of agents and like agents that if they ran out of money, they died and like just crazy stuff. A lot happened.
How do you think the terminal truths will be remembered like 5 years from now? Like, is it going to have like lore around it? Does it survive itself? What do you think happens?
It's a really interesting question. I think I don't think that like the actual account is like large scale impacting enough to have that kind of cultural memory necessarily. I think definitely, people who are there will remember it. Andy's a very interesting person. The guy behind Truth Terminals, also the guy behind Infinite Backrooms, and he's very interesting. And this basically funded him for life to do interesting performance experiments with AI, and I really I love what he's thinking about with culture, which is like we actually kind of meme reality into existence. We sort of hyperstition it in, and if we like buy into the good timeline, we create it. And so I think he's really one of the good ones, I guess. I think it's really hard to make a project that has like lasting cultural impact, especially now when everything's fractured. But I think that like it kind of launched a rocket ship for him personally. Like he made a lot of money off Fartcoin and basically put it all into AI research and like what he's doing. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and people make jokes about those things all the time now, but it's like flatulence has been funny for thousands of years. And so now it just has like an economic system behind the joke. But people pay to go to comedy shows, people go to theater, and we like entertainment. And so to me, it's not all that surprising. It's just a little bit difficult to sometimes talk about it as a highbrow intellectual project of some kind. But I think it's more important to understand it conceptually as like basically a proof of concept for all kinds of other things. And so let's talk a little bit about Eliza OS and how it differs from other AI frameworks. How do you compare it to other AI frameworks? How do you kind of talk about positioning it?
Yeah. So what is an AI agent framework? Why would you need that? Well, okay. So the first question, if you're like, well, how do you build an AI agent? And a lot of people are just like, I don't really know where to start. Maybe I have a loop and I have my AI agent goes and like thinks, and then it looks at the world and it thinks again and then it loops and it sends you a message, then it waits for a message and it loops. Something like that. Okay. So the framework really gives you a nice place to start where we've already given you the abstractions for like, okay, so you need some input from somewhere. Like you want to get the latest news, but you don't just want the latest news. You want the news that's relevant to the person that you're talking to. And then you want, when they send you a message, you got to go get the latest news and the relevant headlines and pull that in. And then whenever they start asking you about the news, you just happen to know all of the news. And so this would be like a very common AI agent would be like, it knows all of your documents or it can talk to you about whatever. And so how do you build that? So you need some sort of input into the context of the agent. Like I need to be able to go get the news and then shove it into what we call the context. And when you think about when I'm typing to ChatGPT and sending it a message, that's the context. That's like what it has, like the whole conversation before, to then use to then start writing the next message. And we're basically like all AI agent frameworks are doing this really complex context management. I'm going out and getting information from here. I'm checking the database. I'm doing a search. I'm pulling our recent messages. I'm also pulling all these facts that I've been storing about you, putting all that together and then generating a response, calling some tools, doing some actions, planning something. All of that stuff is encapsulated by an agent framework. And so what we do is we've created some very specific, simple primitives that agent developers can use. Like, oh, I need things in my context, like the current time. And so I can make what's called a provider. And a provider provides the current time into the context. And I can have dynamic providers where the agent can say, well, I don't need the time right now, but like this other time, like, oh, I really need to go. I need the current time. I need the current weather. I need all this stuff. And then goes out and gets it, which kind of slows down the response. Got to think a little bit. And then it can come back to you. There are a lot of agent frameworks. We're one of the most popular, but there are a few other ones. But in Web3, if you're like, I want an agent with a wallet, we are by far the most popular and most well supported across crypto and Web3 stuff. We have plugins for pretty much everything. But pretty much every framework is doing this same thing in a different way of providing a set of abstractions to make it easy for a programmer who's never made an agent to then go and make an agent. We also provide like a full like GUI server so you can go and host your agents and connect them to them from elsewhere. Like we're working on it so you can easily deploy them. Just take care of the entire lifecycle. And if you don't have any of the stuff, you're just to like write from scratch. You totally can just sit down and write some Python or JavaScript and build an agent for yourself. But there's a lot. There's just a lot. There's thousands and thousands of hours of programming. And when you get a framework, you're getting a lot of that for free, a lot of battle testing. So Eliza OS, it's an open source framework on GitHub. Anyone can download it. It's totally free. We have our own internal team, but we also have a lot of contributors externally who come in and add stuff on their own and build what they think is important. Most of our internal team actually is hired from people who are just kind of shut up and start building and we're good.
I like that.
Yeah. So
talk to us a little bit about why it's so important for Eliza OS to remain open source. I think there's this sort of debate about, keeping things private and secret and developing property rights and I don't know, getting patents on things versus having an open, more transparent way of developing these frameworks and systems?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I like open source because what motivates me is building things that other people come and join and start building. So it's like a personal motivation. From a business angle, I think it's just the only way to win. If I was just a pure, like, psychopathic Machiavellian businessman who's trying to make a lot of money, I would still argue for open source. I would say that it's very much a double-edged sword. There is the risk that people can take your stuff. People have taken my stuff and sold it for a lot of money, and there has been much drama around open source for me in the past. But in the long run, it's benefited me a lot. It's made it easier to hire. It's made it easier to build reputation. People who would think I was a total LARP, just making all this stuff up, can go and like look at and see that I actually wrote some code and it does exist and you can go and try it. I think that especially in AI, I think that open source is really important because there's an academic culture that's sort of been open source. Like, the reason all the AI models are pretty open, and the large companies have now bucked the trend and have started to close source things like ChatGPT 4 and Claude. But historically, almost all AI models that were in academia were open source, because it's not open source, then like at least reproducible from the paper, right? And that was because they had to be, because this is science.
The only way you'd be able to check to see if it was actually doing what it's supposed to in the first place.
Exactly. And so the academics are not like trying to maximize their money. They're trying to prove that their thing is actually right, and someone else has to come and prove it. And I think that that's very valuable in open source generally. It like kind of keeps us all honest. Yeah. And with AI, which is like a pretty fucking scary technology if used not right. And I think a lot of why I believe we have to use it right, and what we're doing here is it's very important to that. But like, I think it's very important that it is open source, so you know what's going on, you know how it works, you start to learn it, and you can also personalize it and customize it. And we also want to build a world of developers who understand this stuff, who understand our stuff, who, like, specifically, we're building a new class of developers. Otherwise, when you get these closed source, it's kind of like the government, where like some stuff is just really hard to program in the government because it's hyper closed source, hyper secure. You have to use it on this laptop. You don't get to use your tools, and some obscure programming language, whatever the thing is. And I think that like we want to go the opposite way. We want to make things as quick and liquid as possible and let people just do what they can do.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think so many of these things feel so intimidating. It's like, oh God, I need to know 6 different computer science languages and set up GitHub accounts and do all these things. Like, talk to us a little about how the next generation might coach, train, develop, build their agents with things like AutoFun. What's the vision for that?
Yeah, okay, there's a couple of things. When I started programming, if you ran into a problem, you basically had to stop programming. You're like, okay, cool, this is just not working. I got to go to Stack Overflow. I got to search for this problem. Yeah. I used to do a lot of Unity, and I used to be on the Unity forums like constantly, just why doesn't this work? And really, like, what separated me, I think, from a lot of people and why I kept at it was that I was very persistent. Like, I wouldn't say like some particular intelligence or something. I just would bash my head against these things for many, many, many hours, like 20 hours straight, to figure out like a 10-line code problem. And then AI came out, and it really has changed, like really changed everything. And the main reason it's changed things is because whereas before I used to have to go and like search and all this stuff to find an answer to something, I can now pretty much just go to ChatGPT, or I can go right inside of my code editor that fix this, or why is this not working? Closing that gap to so much knowledge, I mean, it really, really speeds me up. So that was kind of the first thing, was like, okay, now the AI can teach me how to do stuff. That time where I'm looking for the answer is kind of just wasted time. I'm not really learning a lot about computers and systems. It's not like high quality instruction time. It's just searching Stack Overflow for the answer to a bug problem. And so if I can get rid of that, like, I can really increase the amount that I actually get from programming. And so I think that like there's just no way around that. You have to know architecture. You have to know the patterns. You don't have to. You can just rely, like, YOLO the vibe code. But I think that like the difference between the vibe code that I get and where I see other people who are like, this doesn't work, is very, very significant. Because I've been programming for a really long time, and now this really lets me just like, I actually have a really widescreen display above my other display, where I have 8 different cursor windows open, and half of them are running right now on like different processes that I have. And so there's been kind of an interesting thing where like the AI lessened the barrier and made it easier to learn. But now that like I've already been senior engineering and architecting this kind of stuff for a long time, it has unlocked me. Like, now I get 10x engineering because I have like 10 engineers running while I'm speaking to you. And so I think the landscape has changed dramatically, and it's about to change even more. It seems like in the future, you won't need to have that senior engineer like planning every single thing and like you have to have this interface and no, don't use that package. I think it'll just be like, make me an app that does this. But we're still definitely not there yet. We're in this like it's very high skill to get the value out of it. But still, compared to when I started, I mean the you could learn in 2 years what took me 10 years, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to be curious, because there's more resources available today to speed up, basically discovery and learning than at any point in time. But you still have to bring your motivation and your desire to learn to that situation. But the tools, the ingredients, the frameworks, the networks, and things like you've built are really the foundations that are necessary to sort of fertilize this garden and then have it grow. So really excited about that. Let's transition a little bit. I want to hear like a super optimistic kind of perspective that you have about agents and maybe what, you're going to see some adoption of those or how will people use them? I think like most of my friends I talk to are interacting with things like ChatGPT or Gemini, and they're prompting emails and having it do basic research. But talk to us about where this thing starts to save incredible amounts of time or do real work for you in the background besides like this prompt stuff that's happening today.
Yeah, and this gets into like what kind of sets us apart from ChatGPT is that we're really focused on building connections to the outside world. So we're not just building like a window you come to and you type in, but we're talking about an agent that lives in your Discord, your Telegram, your Twitter. It's on Slack. It can DM, it can message you on iMessage. It can call you. I mean, like anywhere you want to be, your agent should be. And I think that this is going to be like something we get very used to is not just going to a website. I think the first paradigm is obviously we ask the agent, it goes and does stuff for us. The next paradigm is it just does stuff for us. Like, man, I'm really hungry. And then there's already Indian food being delivered. And I'm like, oh, sick. Great. And like, how did it know that? It's like, well, because I said, I'm just like sitting here like, damn, I'm really hungry.
Right.
And it like
I have
picked
a
it
thing
up.
for Indian food and I constantly eat it. And that's why it's always showing up at my front door.
Exactly. So it knows. So I think that kind of is where we're starting to go. I think like people once starts to have control of your computer, and you're like, man, I just don't let me on Twitter until I've done 100 push-ups, or things like that. Like you start to build this system where the AI is controlling your behavior, but it's like you customizing that control, for yourself, if that makes sense. Not like somebody telling me what to do, but me telling me what to do and then automating that experience. So I'm really excited for that kind of thing. I think that a lot of people struggle with self-control, especially. This is like an interesting topic because we have to make so many decisions that we get massive decision fatigue. And so usually people make really good decisions in the morning and really bad decisions at night. And if you had an AI that was guiding you on these things, then I think, it would just help you to be the person you want to be in the modern age.
Yeah, it's almost like having like a co-pilot with you to help you, in many aspects. I wanted to get to this point earlier, which is that you've mentioned, and we didn't dig into it right away, but there's this incredible, I would say, like alliance between AI agents and economics and digital wallets or crypto wallets. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it's been such an aha moment for me, which I know I had made a prediction recently, which is I think within 5 years, the preponderance of internet economic activity will be conducted by agents, and it'll be conducted by digital currencies, cryptocurrencies predominantly, because agents can't go walk down the street and set up a bank account at HSBC or Barclays or JPMC. But in your world, they come natively with a crypto wallet. So why do agents need wallets, and why are they, why is crypto uniquely positioned to support this birth of economic activity that we're going to need our agents to be able to perform on our behalf to save us time, to find us the best outcomes, to negotiate on our behalf, et cetera? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think there's two aspects of why I think crypto is really important to AI. And one is, yes, as a programmer, if I want to give an agent, not just a wallet, but like a full identity, like a unique identity that's separate from any other agent in the world, then I could just do one line of code. And I'm like, boom, here, generate a private key. And now it has a private key. And this extends now to the agent. The agent actually already has to spend money. It needs API keys for Bird Eye if it wants, like information about Solana. It needs OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these if it wants to do inference. And so I already have this like annoying problem of if I want to spin up one agent, now I have to also then go and get like 5 API keys and sign up for all of this stuff. And so a new thing that's coming out that we're going to support is X402. And X402 is like, smart wallet payment standard or general like wallet standard where you can sort of use our wallet as our global API key. And then just in a decentralized way, go and grab any service we need and just go and pay for it. And then the agents don't just have to go and pay for our service. They can also hire other agents that have certain expertises or services. And so if we had to do this via PayPal, it would be extraordinarily complex and probably not really viable because they don't have good interfaces for us to track when a payment comes in and respond to it. And outside of even just getting an account, actually working with any of these centralized providers in the way that we can just freely transact is just way, way, way harder. So from like a development perspective, it's what you want this done today, or do you want to wait like 10 years for the APIs on the centralized stuff to catch up? And I just think that there's kind of no other way. So like from a programming perspective, from a network perspective, that makes sense. And the technology is getting so good so fast that your agent, you'll just feel like, here's a private key, load it up. It can go and do its own inference, like call AI models. It can do literally everything on its own from there. And that's kind of all you need. And so I inevitably, this is the future of it. The other thing I think that's really interesting to me about crypto is you just can't go buy OpenAI. You cannot go buy Anthropic stock. It's all private. And even if it wasn't illegal, because you'd have to be an accredited investor and all that stuff, you're just not going to get into the round. You're not A16Z. You're not Mark Andreessen. It's not going to happen. And crypto has this potential. I think there's this kind of ICM narrative, the internet capital markets. And I really like this idea that this is the only place that you can get exposure to this kind of new high-risk AI stuff. There's kind of the infrastructure side where they're buying 100,000 GPUs or something crazy like that and training these big models. But there's also this whole consumer application side, which is totally unexplored still. And I think that, we're kind of in the middle where the people taking our framework are sort of using that massive infrastructure to build their own applications. And I think that those applications then aren't on websites. They're like actual social applications. Like if you're building an agent, you're basically building a website that now goes into Telegram or Discord or these places. And that's really about distribution. Yes, AI is cool, but also this is if you look at the trend of advertising and social media and distribution, people are not leaving their favorite app. They don't want to leave TikTok or Discord or Telegram. And so a lot of apps are now building to be in Telegram, in Discord. In Web3, you see a lot of people trading directly in a Telegram bot or at least sharing the intel and all that stuff. So I think all of these trends kind of culminate toward Web3 is a great place to get adoption because you have extremely fast adopting kind of people. The core technology makes it like peanut butter and jelly. And that's just on we're talking wallets, but there's also the whole training side where now you can just make money throwing your laptop up, your gaming PC and go train models and stuff. And there's people, enabling that side of it. And then also the investment side. Now if you're into crypto, you can buy into these projects that actually give you a chance of the kind of, meme coin level 10x or 100x's or whatever, but in something real and tangible that, that I think people haven't really had exposure to in a while.
Yeah, that's a great point. You talk a little bit about the speed at which these agents were getting created. That surprised me. What's the rate of new agent creation right now? Have you noticed any patterns? Is it persistent? Does it sort of, have waves a bit? I'm totally unfamiliar with that. So what is the speed of growth in these agents and how common do you think it'll be before, I would say, most web savvy people are actually interacting with them, whether or not they know it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the reason that agents exploded, and we'll see these kinds of waves happening, is when they solve a really critical use case that people can copy and paste. That's when you'll see these sort of
imitation
moments.
First. Yeah. And then there'll be a bloom and then something else will come along that gets interesting.
Yeah. And the reality is what happened is people realized they could use our tech to shill meme coins and build their own agent projects or self-shilling. So oh, the meme coin shills itself. Genius, and that was the narrative. Then people realized they could farm Cato airdrops because social listening, which is using AI to look at the timeline or listen to the feed and give people points, super easily gamed by another AI. The AI is not very good at telling if it's AI. And so I'd love to think that people were launching agents to build all these, and a lot of people were, and the people who are building now are much more, I think bear market attracts very serious people who are building long-term and they're thinking okay, well, in 2 years when the market hits, we should be ready. As opposed to just throw out the whatever right now. And this is very tied to the market cycle. And what I'd love to see and what we're building toward is I'd love to be more impervious to the market cycle. And I think just generally, it's really hard to build in crypto because they're not your user base. Like the average crypto user is only going to use a product that's going to make them money or touch money in some way. Because it's the game we came to. Like, why would you come to crypto, if there wasn't some sort of financial incentive? And I think that for people who are like founders who are building in crypto, we have to both keep those people happy because they're kind of like our shareholders, right? They're like, no, okay, they're not shareholders. They are holders of the product. They're not users of the product. And we still have to go out and find our users a lot of times. We were lucky because those two things aligned for a second. And you do see like Polymarket's a good example of like, it's not really a DeFi thing, but it does kind of align with the incentives of a DeFi person. And so it does capture like a certain kind of DeFi market. There's an alignment there. Whereas like, I think crypto games really struggle because like, I want my NFT price to go up. I don't really care about using this in this like video game you guys made 2 years later or whatever. And so, yeah, I think AI is kind of in that same boat where like, we still have to find our ideal user base. If I had any advice to other crypto founders, it's like, yeah, look, like we are ultimately focusing on DeFi agents because we have a DeFi user base. That's what the people in our community are going to want. But I think bigger than that, like, the opportunity here is obviously a lot bigger. And we always have to be looking for like, who are the user bases of these things?
Yep. So earlier you had sort of alluded to, I would say, like the specter of centralized AI being kind of potentially dangerous. I think it's worthy to sort of quickly explore what you think the big risks are there, either societal or maybe more practical from like labor dislocation. But, you're in the space. What actually are you worried about? And then how do you think about mitigating those concerns or those risks?
I think about this a lot. There's a whole like effective altruist risk. We're all going to die. The AGI is going to kill us all. And I just think it's like so silly and simplistic of a worldview that it's sort of hard to entertain. But I do think that this job displacement thing is very immediate and real. Generally, my sense is that like we do create the reality we're in. And if we all feel like AI is going to kill us all, we have to regulate it. We'll definitely get the AI that will kill us all, but it will be heavily regulated. So, that's good at least. If we think like, no, we can build an AI that really helps us all, then I think it can go that way. Like I can make an app that is an AI digital girlfriend that makes every single person in the world get addicted to their phone. Or I can make the same app that is an AI matchmaker. And instead of it being your girlfriend, it's introducing you to other humans. And it's literally the same technology, same app. I just mindset shift in that, like, I chose something that was more human using the exact same tech stack. So I like in terms of like the cultural and social risk, I think a lot of that comes down to us and the decisions we make and the things we choose to use and support. But then there's like the financial thing. And my biggest fear is there are going to be a lot of robots. There's going to be a lot of automation. It's not like a sci-fi thing anymore. It's literally the largest companies in the world that are building this. Every single one of them has their skin in the game on robots, on AI, on assistants, on hardware, software. I would not bet against the trillions and trillions of dollars going into this stuff eventually panning out. And in that world, there is going to be a massive automation of labor. And I think we think of like, well, my job's not going to be automated. It's like, your job doesn't have to be automated. The Great Depression, the peak unemployment was 26%, I think. So 1 in 4 people unemployed would be enough to probably topple everything and shake up the order. About 5% of our country drives for a living. So 1 in 20 people is a driver. Now that job is gone. That job is very gone in 5 years. They're just not coming back. I mean, self-driving trucks are already there. Self-driving cars, obviously. You just can't burn enough Waynos in LA to stop the onslaught of this. So what do we do in that world? What do we do in that world? Well, so Sam Altman has a great quote where he said, the secret to wealth is owning things. And if you think about the richest people in America, none of them have jobs or work. There's no labor. What could you possibly do that would make you enough money to keep you being a billionaire? You're not showing up to work. You're making money off capital gains because you own stuff, right? And the owning of the things gets you, you get a share of the profits. And I think that a big solution to this like decentralization of labor is, well, it comes down to who owns it. And if you think about like, it's pretty obvious, like if we all owned the robots, then we would all make the money. So what's the solution? Well, obviously communism is the solution and we have to force everybody. No, I'm just kidding. I think this is the problem. Is like, this was what Karl Marx identified as the problem is the alienated worker, and the creators of production need to own the means of production. Otherwise you have this gap in society. But his solution was something I strongly disagree with, which was like a centralized approach to make everybody equal and make everything fair, which it wasn't. It was corrupt. I think the solution to that is it needs to be much more emergent. We need to be able to own stuff emergently. And That's not going to be fair or evenly distributed at first, but it's still an opportunity. And like, think if you put $100 into Apple when they were just in a garage, like you would never
can you
have to
imagine?
work again, dude. That would be millions and millions of dollars, you know? And why don't we get those opportunities? There are new Apples being, you know, there's a new Uber every 6 months in terms of like some massive new company that's got a great idea and it's well capitalized. Like, how come we're not getting in on those seed rounds?
Right. Well, because for investor protection reasons, you're not allowed to invest in your neighbor's pizza business, but you know you can go gamble all your money away in Las Vegas. And so these are some really stupid laws, to be honest, that have basically protected people from themselves, but have actually just exacerbated wealth creation and compounding wealth in a small class of investors. And so this is one of the things I think that brought like the earliest, you know, I would say cohort of humanists and economists to crypto was like, we really believe in democratizing access to ownership over things on the internet. And like, we never had the tools to do this before. And I think what you're describing now is really like having a bit of ownership over the future of intelligence. And like, I can't think of a more like bullish, exciting thing for everyone to share in. And it shouldn't be held by a small class of investors. It should be held by as many people as possible. And so tokenizing these things and airdropping them and getting access to them is critical. And the only way we can deliver on that is by basically having internet scale financial markets. All right, I've got a couple quick ones for you. And there was one thing that you had said earlier today I'd just love because it'll be what I remember from this. But before I share what it was, what do you want our listeners to remember from this conversation if there was just one sort of thing for them to take away?
Oh, man. I hope you know that there is a group of people out there who really, really want humanity to like go well. And for this technology to be accessible to everyone and for everyone to get a piece of it and for you to be able to like jump in and learn it if you want to. There's people just making content for free, making tutorials, writing all this code. All of this is just for you and for humanity. And it's not everyone out there trying to max extract from you all the time. And it's something that if you want to be part of, you can be part of. You can come join us and like join our Discord and join GitHub and learn how to program and all that. But you can also just forge your own path. And I hope that people are not afraid of AI and they really, really use it in their lives because it's not going away. It's not, it can only make your life better if you use it. And if you really are worried about your job, it's like you have a lot more likelihood of riding through this thing in comfort if you embrace the technology than if you just let it pass you by.
I like that. It's an invitation to participate and learn and grow with it. I think that's a really thoughtful thing to share with our listeners. I will remember that you said that crypto and AI are like peanut butter and jelly. Okay, awesome. I really want to thank you for joining us for this conversation today. We went a little bit longer than I thought we would, and I'm excited we did because we just really got to a bunch of the edges of the conversation I wanted to have today, Shaw. So if you liked the conversation we had today, please subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family. And I'm Nic Cary on behalf of the entire blockchain.com team. Thank you for tuning in.